Hello, I'm Dr. Robert Bastian of Laryngopedia and Bastian Voice Institute. Our topic is muscles, general idea of muscles, and more specifically, vocal muscle. Well, how in general do you keep muscles strong? Everyone knows it's by using them. You do some sort of exercise regimen or you use them in the course of your daily life, and they usually rise to the challenge and become able to do what you ask them to do repeatedly. Well, think about three sort of typical kinds of people and their muscles. Think of the bodybuilder who goes almost every day to a gym and works with a trainer to build and sculpt muscle. But there's a second group of people who are active and their work requires muscular use. Think of a carpenter lifting 2x4s, climbing up and hammering and lifting sheets of drywall, or in this same second group, think of a daycare worker who is lifting children all day, getting down on the floor to play with them, getting back up. So those are all people who would have quite good muscular strength. But then think of the third group of people, sedentary people. Think of an individual who drives to work, to a desk job, uses the elevator even to climb one flight of stairs. He or she drives home, walks into an apartment or condominium, there's no yard work to do, and maybe spends evenings reading or in front of a TV or social media. That third person, the office worker, might not have sufficient strength to lift a husky child or to put a heavy suitcase in the overhead rack of an airplane, or in trying to do those things might injure him or herself. Well, let's switch from this concept of muscles in general to those we don't think about as much that help us make voice. The larynx and vocal tract is a muscular system too. Let me show you here on a model. This is the larynx. My larynx is right here. This is the Adam's apple or Eve's apple sitting here with the windpipe going down into the lungs. And you'll notice there are muscles on the outside. This is only part of them. There are muscles in the larynx. This is on the back side. But down deep inside where the vocal cords live, there are muscles as well. And I'll show you using this drawing. You can see here inside the voice box, these are the vocal cords. Here's one and here's the other. And they are made up of muscle. This is the open or breathing position. And when this person produces voice, those vocal cords need to pinch together firmly with those muscles sufficiently strong to produce a strong voice. If a person has a strong larynx, when those vocal cords are pinched together, here's an example, you can see that the vocal cords are firm and they come together completely, creating this little dark line between them. By contrast, here's someone with very little vocal cord muscle, and you notice now that there's a large gap between the vocal cords don't pinch together as well. And when that happens, weakness within the laryngeal muscles, the vocal cord muscles and the muscles surrounding, then the person begins to have difficulties vocally. They may say, my voice becomes faded as the day wears on, I can't be heard in noisy places, it sounds thin, and that kind of thing. Why would they have that kind of weak vocal tract? It could be because of introversion and extremely little voice use. It could be due to aging. A person who's 80 or 90 might have weakening, just as they have some weakening of general muscles, they may have some weakening in the larynx. Or think of the person who's been very ill at any age, has been in a hospital bed and very weak, and they may also develop that weak, fuzzy, gravelly voice, can't be heard in noisy places with people asking you to repeat all the time. Well, what I want to talk about is how to respond to a weak voice, and I'm assuming, of course, that you've been examined and other conditions have been ruled out. Things like nodules, polyps, various growths, benign and malignant, and neurological disorders. So all of that's been ruled out. You've been told your voice is weak and you need to build it. Well, what would be a do-it-yourself strategy that you could safely apply without oversight? Now, obviously, it's great if you could do this with a speech pathologist, but I'm thinking of people who live 30 miles from the nearest one, or you maybe have to wait several weeks to get in and start the process, and this is something you could begin on your own while you wait. The regimen is 3 simple vocal tasks, each done very briefly several times across the day. Each of the 3 tasks needs to be done assertively and even aggressively. You're not going to do vocal tasks like this little pink barbell, but you're going to do something more aggressive, more effortful, like this one. And just as I can use this barbell to strengthen my arm in different ways, this would be slightly different strengthening task than this. Sort of works a slightly different set of muscles, and maybe this works yet another set of muscles. And so in that sense, we're going to do 3 different vocal tasks to build the voice in different ways. First one is what I call the voice of authority, or the loud, low, angry voice. It's, long ago, people found that it was easier to travel on water than on land. It's emphatic and it's loud, and you should have this sense that you're really exerting yourself. The second is what I call the ship ahoy voice. Now you're calling across the street. Ship ahoy! Neighbor, look out! You know, you're going to step in a hole or something. You would use a quite different but also loud voice. And the third is simply a siren from lowest possible to highest possible pitch in your voice, like a ooh. On ooh, I usually do ooh. And I'm not doing them quite as loudly as I would for fear of disturbing the audio system here. Well, how, when, and where would you do these exercises? You would find times like when you're in the shower, driving to work, in the basement, and remember, I didn't tell you, but each task is only done for about 20 seconds. That's not a long time. So each episode of voice building is 1 minute. You could do a minute per exercise, but let's begin with 20 seconds. So it's 1 single minute in the shower, driving to work, driving home, and so forth. How do you perform them? You imagine you're standing like an oak tree, or you're thinking of yourself as the Incredible Hulk, and if you're in a car, you're gripping the wheel like this, and you pick some series of words. It could be counting, it could be reciting a poem, it could be narrating the drive that you're taking, and you do the tasks 20 seconds really loudly. Now, if you're by nature a very quiet person and not really in touch with your big voice, and keep in mind, there are people who have basically never made a loud vocal sound in their entire lives. So if that's you, you might need an observer, family or friend, to observe you doing these 3 tasks, because they might surprise you by saying, oh, come on, that wasn't very, convincing. Keep in mind, it's not necessarily the actual loudness that comes out, it's the attempt to be loud, it's the effort. You need to feel that your muscles are straining, that your veins are bulging, that your eyes are bugging out. It's got to be very intense. And as an aside, it's good also to over-articulate, because part of intelligibility is articulation. So we're going for loud, but more than for loud, we're going for that sense of effort. Now, purely to get across to my patients the idea of how aggressively I want them to do this, I humorously tell them that if they live in an apartment or townhome, they should warn the neighbors so they don't call the cops. And people who travel can still do this, because in their hotel room, they can take a pillow, put it directly onto their face, and do their voice building directly into the pillow, and you won't bother anyone. Now, what can you expect from this voice building process? Well, not much for the first week or so. if I do my very first exercise session with this barbell, I'm not going to finish and then say to myself, wow, my arm feels stronger. In fact, right after initial episode, I might say, it actually makes my arm feel weaker. It feels tired and weak. It's similar for voice building. Your voice can seem worse immediately after doing one of your sessions. So we suggest that you just commit to doing this voice building. Remember, 20 seconds, 20 seconds, and 20 seconds. But we'd like you to do that 4 to 6 times a day. Don't even think about it, whether it's helping or not, for a minimum of 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, you can take stock of what has happened. Now, if you notice even a small improvement, you can keep it up. And some people choose to increase the time a little bit. Maybe they'll do a minute, and a minute instead of 20 seconds, 20 seconds, 20 seconds. But at some point, at the level that you're willing to do, the amount of time you're willing to do, you're going to plateau. You're going to say, okay, I don't notice anything changing. That's when you take final stock of what you've accomplished. Now, if zero improvement occurs, because there will be a few with severe bowing or other issues where you don't hear much difference. But that group has still accomplished something, because you now know that voice building by itself possibly has no real potential for you. Or you will say, okay, I tried it on my own, now let me go see if a speech pathologist can help me additionally. So, but much more commonly, people will say, yeah, there is some benefit. Well, what do they describe as the benefit? Many of them say, my speaking voice sounds more or less the same, but I have more voice to call upon in loud circumstances. I remember, for example, a man who said, I used to finish the church worship service and I would get out of there, because I found that when I was in the narthex and people were trying to visit with me, they were straining and I felt awkward and it just was very stressful, and so I would just leave. Now, he said, I don't have that problem. In addition, some people will say that I still have a sort of fuzzy voice. It's not as good as I'd like it to be, but I have better stamina. I used to really fade and have not a lot of voice left by mid-afternoon, and now I can kind of make it through the workday. I have a little better stamina. So after voice building, it could be that your voice is still not great, but it might be better enough to meet your needs. Now, if not, then we can begin to think about that next option, again, the speech pathologist, or you could go to a laryngologist like me or one of my colleagues or someone near you and talk about surgical implants through a little 1-inch incision on the front of the neck, or by injection through the front of the neck, plumping material, or through the mouth. Now, at this point you may say, okay, I get it, I get the idea, and I don't need to hear any more, so feel free to stop now. But if you would like a summary, 8-part summary, here it is. Number 1, just like arms and legs, vocal tract muscles can be strengthened by challenging them. The larynx, the neck, the chest wall, the abdomen. 2, short bursts of intense and even aggressive voice use several times a day, 4 to 6 times a day, can effectively build vocal tract muscles. Not instantly, but across a few weeks. 3, while it would be ideal to do this with a voice-qualified speech pathologist, it is safe for you to use your voice very aggressively on your own, even if you don't do it all that well, even if you're a bit clumsy with it, because the duration of the aggressive voice use is so short. And in hundreds and hundreds of people who I have suggested this strategy to in my clinical practice, I've never seen an injury. 4, the 3 basic exercises are that low, loud, low voice of authority, long ago people found, like that. The second is the ship ahoy, long ago people found, like that. And the third is the siren, that ooh, and much louder than that. 5, you don't need to schedule specific time. Instead, you do your brief bursts of voice building in the shower, driving to work, during an errand, in the car alone, at home, down in the basement, and so forth. 6, if voice building helps to avoid re-weakening of the voice, keep up these short bursts of aggressive voice use as a way of life. Maybe you'll find that just a couple of times or 3 times a day are sufficient to keep the voice at that stronger level. 7, if voice building has helped but not enough, you can still take your quest for a better voice the next step to a voice-qualified speech pathologist or a voice coach. And 8, if the entire process from having that initial exam to make sure there's nothing other than weakness, to your own do-it-yourself process and maybe process with a speech pathologist, if all of that together fails to take you where you need to be vocally, a laryngologist like me, Dr. Richardson, Dr. Hosley, or someone near you will be ready to think about another solution. And it will help them to know that you've already done a credible attempt of voice building, because that can skip you ahead one step in the process. Well, thank you for listening to this video. All the best to you, and here's wishing you a strong voice.